What is good, YouTube? It's your boy back with another video. I have not posted on this channel for years and years because I haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh for years and years. It's been the better part of a decade since I have played, but I've recently gotten back into the game to play some Edison format. Edison format is really fun, really diverse. I mean, it's just kind of just everything I want in Yu-Gi-Oh basically, and especially compared to like the most recent formats with like Telemans and shit. It's just kind of a breath of fresh air. Yeah, so I've been playing a decent bit recently. I think I got into the Edison around January, so it's been a couple months. Yeah, I played a zombie deck at an event, a tournament yesterday, where the first place was kind of like a prize card event, where first place was a Speed Duel Book of Moon Super. So obviously not a really expensive, huge card, but it's still kind of cool nonetheless to have like an actual tournament for Edison rather than just like a locals every week. Yeah, I played the zombie list. I went undefeated 5-0 through the tournament. I played against Disaster Dragons twice, once in Swiss and then once in the finals. I played against the Chaos Fairy Carpath list. I played against Frogs, and I played against um, Light Swans. So quite a diverse kind of you know de- list of decks there, as Edison format is. There's quite a few decks. But yeah, I just thought I'd show the list. It's pretty similar to Soul's list from RBET. There are a few cards that are different. I kind of just wanted to showcase the list for anyone who's not following the online events. And yeah, it kind of explains some card choices and why I think cards are really good and some others maybe aren't so much. But I guess I'll just get started without further ado with the list. So it's two Goblin Zombie, obviously, yeah. Two Pyramid Turtle. I was basically testing like the day before, like so on like the day before the tournament, I was testing three Pyramid Turtle, but I just couldn't get enough games in. Didn't have enough time to actually kind of like form an opinion on whether two or three is better. Basically, the worst part about this deck is there's some games where you just completely brick on recruiters and completely brick on a way to get the Goblin Zombie. Maybe you draw one recruiter and it gets like Deity Warrior Lady or Kaiast or Torrential or Nobleman or some shit, and you basically just can't play the game whatsoever. Like you kind of just straight lose. So that doesn't happen too often. I think yesterday it happened once out of 15 or 14 games I played. Obviously that's just like circumstantial evidence, so it's not really like a data or anything. But it doesn't happen super often. But when it does, it feels really bad, and you just kind of scoop. So I was considering playing three, but I just played two for the tournament because that's kind of the consensus like best amount. The rest of the zombies, it's like Plague, Mizuki, Zombie Master, and Reaper. I mean, like Zombie Master and Reaper aren't the best cards, but you kind of just have to play them. Zombie Master's a great extender at times, and Reaper's kind of nuts in certain situations. I guess I side Reaper out a bit of game two and game threes, especially against like Blackwing, where they can just kind of pierce and they don't really care about Reaper. But it's a pretty good game on. Yeah, I played three Kai's. Yeah, this deck is basically Kai's dot deck. I mean, Kai's is like when I came back to Edison format, I was just like, wait, isn't Kai's just like far and away the best card in the format? It's like not even close, and I still think that way. So yeah, I basically wanted a deck where I could play three Kai's. I'm not a huge fan of Frogs, just personally, it, like doesn't fit my playstyle, which is obviously like a bit of a weak comment, but like I just don't like the deck. Personally, I acknowledge it's really good. I just don't play it. And then I think Quick Draw is kind of average, even though I like the deck. So I thought like Zombies is the best deck that I can play, which facilitates three Kai's. And this card's just the nuts. It's completely game breaking in a lot of situations, and it like eats like heaps of solemn judgments randomly because if it goes through, it wins you the game on the spot. And yeah, tributing like Sangana Goblin Zombie for it is quite sick as well. In terms of like other recruiters, I guess like two Tomato is pretty standard. I think in most zombie lists these days, you can play like three Pyramid Turtle or one Tomato, but I think everyone is on the consensus that like four recruiters is the best. As I was saying, I was testing a fifth with the third Pyramid Turtle, but I'm not sure if that's like the right move yet. Sangan is pretty good in this deck as well. I think in some zombie lists you can absolutely cut this card, but I think playing three Kais is just nice to have like an extra tribute fodder. Making Catasta is also like pretty relevant as well because yeah, Fairies is becoming more and more popular. Obviously, Questia Light Swan is really good as well. So Catasta is actually getting more and more relevant as the days go by in Edison. So I think having a level 3 that you can obviously sync with and search with is pretty nuts as well. So I think Sangan's quite good and it's pretty well placed in the deck. Two Diva, I don't think you need to play three in this specific list. If you're playing the hero version where you can send a Diva off Future Fusion, maybe you play three, but yeah, playing two is fine. Obviously, if you draw both, it really sucks, but whatever. Two DD Crow, I think DD Crow is incredible in the meta at the moment. There's not really any decks where you're hating life having DD Crow on your main. Usually against basically against every deck, there's at least like one interaction where Crow's pretty good, and then against some decks, it's the complete stones. So obviously on the Frog matchup, which is why I kind of main this card, and why maybe Soul mains the card as well. The Frog matchup is actually quite scary against zombies because um, obviously with zombies you can like pop off and like OTK your opponent, whereas frogs like play, Trag Gores, some battle faders, so like OTKing is not as kind of prevalent. And then like frogs don't really care about synchros either. So like your OTKs are kind of less relevant, your synchros are less relevant, and then they play three Kaias, which just fucks your deck completely. So the frog matchup is quite scary. So I think playing two Tro in the main deck and then two Book of Life is kind of enough to get you there in a lot of circumstances. And then I think game two and game three, with certain side cards, I think you can kind of have an edge. But yeah, Crow's also really the nuts in the mirror, and it's also great against quick draw. I mean, the list goes on and on. Crow's just an incredible card. So I think, especially in the main board, because people don't expect it. So there's a lot of times where your opponent might make a play. They might take a line where it's kind of like a multifaceted line, and they end with a play like a Debris or an Avarice or a Plague, a Mizuki play, or what have you, Miracle even, right? And if you have a Crow, it just kind of fucks them completely, and they'll make that line. They'll take that line because no one really plays Crow in the main deck, at least not in zombies. Obviously, more it's going to happen more now, but like I'm just saying, previously, and then you can just Crow them, and the game's kind of over because they just weren't expecting it. So it's pretty nuts in the main board. Drag, Gauze, Dad. Pretty self-explanatory for those cards. What are the spells? 2 Book of Life. It's pretty standard. I mean, it clogs a bit, but like whatever. It's a really good extender. Foolish, pretty standard. I actually end up siding this card out game 2 and game 3 quite a bit because it just really kind of loses to Crow, which obviously people are going to bring in against your deck, like 2 or 3. So yeah, I mean, like, I'm not playing Malicious, so basically Foolish acts as a Bazooki or a Plague in your bin. I've found that most of the time you actually want to just have Plague in hand and like summon it and synchro and then use the effect to come back and synchro again. So putting it in bin isn't even the greatest thing ever. So it's usually just Foolish for Mizuki really. And then, I mean, obviously if you Foolish for Mizuki and then you banish the Mizuki to target another zombie monster in your graveyard, and they Crow that monster, then you've just banished the Mizuki and another zombie monster, and you've lost a card in hand which is Foolish for one of their Crows. It's a pretty bad spot, so I think I sided this out game 2 and game 3 like a lot of the time. Allure is pretty obvious. Brain. Burial, not like a heap of people maining Burial, but I think like the card's really good. It's just a free extender that you can draw and kind of just like keep going and pop off with. And I'm actually siding Return and maining Burial. I'll explain that, I guess, why I do that when I get to the side deck, but I think Burial's really good in this deck. Mind Control is pretty obvious, it's just insane, and Typhon heavy, whatever. Bottomless and Prisons. So I'm playing 2 Bottomless, 2 Prisons for similar reasons. I guess not every zombie list mains these cards. But yeah, I just found like you are basically at the start of every turn, right? You want to have a Goblin Zombie on board, so you can either tribute it or synchro with it. So these cards just help you achieve that goal. And it's really good against Black Wings, which is kind of a matchup that's a bit scary. Obviously, Deep Prison's not great against Frogs, which I've just kind of outlined is also a bad matchup in theory. But I think it's every other deck. It's basically pretty good, except maybe a deck that means like 3 Lila. That's basically it. Prison's just the nuts in so many situations. I was originally sideboarding this card, but I just found like in testing every game, I just fucking wanted a Prison in my hand. So like it's just pretty insane, really. I played 1 Moonblast. I don't know about this number. It kind of feels weird playing a one-off, but as I mentioned, like you don't really like. I don't. Obviously, having Plague like discarding Plague is fine, but like sometimes I really don't actually want to ditch Plague. I would rather have it in my hand. Not always. It's probably somewhere around like 60-40 or 50-50, but it's not like you always want to have Plague in your grave basically. Send Plague to the grave basically. Obviously, ditching Mizuki is really good, but you can kind of ditch Mizuki off Rhinak pretty easily as well. I mean, you make a lot of level 6 synchros. You have a lot of opportunities to make them. So I think without Malicious, this card loses a bit of value, and like it's obviously really good, but I just don't know if it's worth it. Like if you brick and you don't open a way to get to Goblin Zombie, this is just another added brick because it's a -1, obviously. So yeah, it's obviously really good, but I don't know if like the payoff is worth the kind of cost in this list with no Malicious. So I'm playing 1. This is subject to change for sure, but for now it's just 1 card. So Mirror Force, TT, main 1 Dust. This seems pretty standard in zombie lists. Soul main 2. I think 1 is fine. I think like less people are maining Impression these days because Frogs is just getting better and better and better. And I think like, yeah, I don't know, like Dust is obviously really good. It's good against like Future Fusion deck, Oppression. just general back row hate as well. Character shoot and judgment is pretty self-explanatory as well. So yeah. Extra deck's pretty standard. It's like Chimera Tech for Cyber Dragon, Armory Arm for Mind Control and Brain Control plays. Catastrophe is obviously really relevant against fairies, and Light Sworn you make with Stengen. Brian X the best card in the extra deck by a mile. One of the rulings that I learnt recently is that you can't call Prior with Bryanak or any card really, if you synchro with Goblin Zombie, because Goblin Zombie is mandatory and you have to use that effect first, so you can't call Prior. So you just have to be a bit careful. You don't really want to shotgun Briar into like multiple back row, get a bottomless, and then you can't ditch Mizuki. That's just kind of a play that you have to be a bit careful about, but it's obviously really good. Doom Kaisers for the mirror, it rarely comes up, to be honest. Revive King Heart is actually a standout in the deck against so many matchups. It's kind of insane. Like Quick Draw, Fairies, the Mirror. It's really nice, and you can Mizuki it back, which is lovely. Gaia Knight is pretty average. It's just literally there to be like a level 6 synchro name. Basically, like if you know you're going to make a level 8, like your plan is to like end on Stardust or Colossal or Fort Ruler or whatever, and you just need to put a level 6 in the bin to make it, you just make Gaia. So whatever. Goyo, it's there. I don't make Goyo that much anymore these days. It's usually like Bryanak or Revive King Hades, but obviously Goyo has to be in your extra deck. Black Rose, for obvious reasons. Play Armor Master if I Mind Control or Brain Control at Gale. Yeah, it's okay. It hasn't really come up too much, so whatever. 2 Stardust. I actually decided to start Road, so obviously you can make 1 Stardust by yourself and then 1 Starlight Road, so 2 is probably the right number. 1 Dark End, great. Thought Ruler, great. Colossal, great. So yeah, all those cards are pretty standard. The side deck is 2 Cyber Dragon. I think this card is like kind of whatever. I'm like seriously considering cutting it. In theory, like it's obviously the nuts against Machine Dot deck, but I think so. Basically, I think the decks that Cyber Dragon is really good against are just quite bad in general. So I don't really know why I'm like starting cards with bad decks like GBs and like Hero Beat and Machine Dot deck. I think are just kind of bad in the meta at least right now. So I don't know if I should be starting 2 Cyber Dragons. I know people side against like other decks as well. Like I've seen a bunch of people side Cyber Dragon against zombies, like against my deck, and I don't really get that. I mean, I guess you can like Cyber Dragon into Chaos and banish the Recruiter, which is fine. But then if they have TT, the game's over. I don't know. Anyway, like this card is fine. I might cut like 1 or 2, depending on how the meta shapes out. Like I rarely play against Machine Dot deck. I mean, online it's obviously more relevant than live. Well, not obviously, but for me. But yeah, it's whatever. Deity Crow, third one. It might be a bit too much playing 3, but I'm just fucking hate frogs so much. So yeah, I'm just like I'll side 3. And then if I play against Quick Draw or the Mirror, it's obviously the nuts as well. So I think 3 Crow is probably fine. Lightning Vortex is just a card, like kind of like a one-off card. It's just for dumb shit like Disaster Dragons that play like Kawakimiri Drago, or like players who will just use 2 Wyverns in the end phase and leave up 2 Red Eyes. You can just fucking Vortex, I guess. It's for Christia, and if fairy players like have multiple recruiters on the board or whatever. It's for decks that have side like Vanity's Fiend and Fossil Diner. It's for other shit as well, like Light Swans that can just flood the board and be really annoying. Sometimes you can start against Frogs, I guess, which I actually did, which I'll explain why I did that soon. My Body's a Shield is really good against Blackwings and other decks that play Deck Dev via Turbo, which is basically Deck Dev Turbo. Yeah, it's kind of really good. There's not much else to say about it. I could consider playing 2 of this card in the side deck, but I actually only own 1 as it stands, so I just played like 1. I side decked 2 Starlight Road. This never actually popped off on the weekend, but I mean, I guess that's probably because I didn't play against Blackwings. Yeah, basically this is just for Blackwings. I know Soul main one of these and side another. I think in the main board it's kind of really bad. It's just a card that's usually dead a lot of the time, and your opponent you can pretty easily read it as well if they're paying attention. So I think like in the main board it's whatever. Against Blackwings it's kind of the nuts because they have 3 Ick Attack, they have Mirror Force, they have Heavy, they have Torrential. So there's a lot of cards that can actually like resolve Starlight Road. And then obviously if you get a Stardust out against Blackwings it's pretty fucking good. So yeah, 2 Starlight Roads pretty solid I'd say. 2 Light Mirror is for fairies obviously, and Light Swans. I think I've tested 3 in the sideboard before. I think it's a bit cloggy if you side in 3. You have to be a bit careful about how you side out with this deck because you need to keep enough cards in to actually play the game and like your engine. So you can't just side in like a bunch of floodgates and just try to stop them while simultaneously trying to play. So I think 2 is probably the right number. You could definitely argue 3, but for now I'm just siding 2. I'm also siding 2 Skill Drain. So Skill Drain is just the nuts against frogs. Like plain and simple. It's just basically like they can't play the game. Sorry. I actually got decked out in my frog matchup, game 2, because I had skill drain and he couldn't play the game, and then I also couldn't play the game. I was ahead in cards in deck, but then he randomly played one Avarice and just Avarice back his cards and like decked me out. So yeah, that just goes to show like how fucking oppressive this is against frogs. And yeah, basically my game plan against frogs is I have 3 Crow, 2 Book of Life to banish their Treeborn. Then I have skill drains for their Monarchs. You make Revive King Hades under skill drain that is 2/450 and can bid over the Monarchs, and then you just keep Mizukiing it back if they kill it. So obviously if they banish it, you have Return and you have Burial. So that's the idea. You just stop them playing and you make Revive King and just beat their shit, and that's kind of the game plan. So it's worked really well so far, and I think skill drain is the nuts against frogs and also Quick Draw and a few other decks, maybe like G-Base as well. 2 Dust Tornado, really good in the board against random shit. Oppression, like obviously just kind of doesn't let you play the game. Future Fusion not deck. Some people still side Shadow Mirrors, so I think that card's pretty bad, but like some people side it. This obviously helps against that, so Dust is pretty needed in the board. I wouldn't side Decree, as obviously I'm maining a bunch of traps. Return, so the reason why I'm boarding Return and maining Burial is because I think that, obviously so basically like the cost of Return is higher. You pay half your life points and it requires setup, but the payoff is in theory, much higher than Burial, right? Because you can return all your monsters to the field, whereas Burial just sends them to the grave. But I think like game 1, without playing Mali in this deck, you don't actually have a bunch of ways to banish cards. So it's obviously Mizuki and its Plague, right? And then you're relying on your opponent to banish cards for you. So with their Bottomlesses, with their Prisons, with their Crows. Obviously, basically no decks main Crow. A lot of decks are starting to not main Prison as well. And then some decks don't even play Bottomless in the main. So if you're relying on your opponent to banish a lot of your monsters, and they don't actually play a card to banish your monsters, Return can obviously can usually just be like pretty low value game 1. And I think the cost actually doesn't warrant the pop-off in game 1, that is. Obviously, sometimes it will. Sometimes your opponent plays Bottomlesses and Prisons and such. But yeah, I think like game 1, I think Burial's a bit more, I guess, consistently good because yeah, it's just a card you can draw and extend with. You don't have to. It doesn't require setup. Doesn't require any cost. It's just a free extender basically. So I sideboard Return for when obviously I know people are just going to siding Crows, and Bottomlesses and Prisons, and that way I have two ways to banish my own cards, which is Plague and Mizuki, and then they have like 6 or 7 cards to banish my ways to banish my cards with their cards basically. So I think Return gets a lot better. The stealing is a lot better for Return in game 2 and game 3, and the floors is still the same obviously. So Deep Prison is really good as well. It's the third Deep Prison on the board. Yeah, it's really good against certain decks. It's pretty great to be honest. So yeah, that's the zombie deck that I ran this weekend. I think it's really well placed in the meta to be honest. I think it's definitely an ST deck, and it could be the best deck of the format. It's kind of hard to say. Obviously, Frogs is becoming more and more popular, so maybe there's a spot. Maybe there's like a way where zombies isn't that good because the frog matchup's kind of shit-ish. But yeah, the deck was really nice. I'm like if I was playing any big tournaments like the RBATs or whatever, I'd play zombies probably for now. But yeah, that's the deck list. Let me know what you thought. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.